are in the middle of the desert. This is Timna Park, just north of Eilat, which is the southernmost point of Israel. We're near the Red Sea. We're not that far from Egypt and Jordan. And right now we're in a very unique spot in this desert. Where are we?
We're actually sitting in a copper mine. The origins of the mines here are 5,000 years ago. These mines are only from about 3,300 years ago. And you said we're near Egypt. In those days, this was part of Egyptian influence. It wasn't Egypt proper, but the Egyptians were here. And they found copper ore. Actually, period before that, copper ore was known to be here. The Egyptians, some 3,300 years ago, which glides us into the time of David and Solomon 3,000 years ago, established a mining industry here in which, and interesting enough and not surprisingly, they understood that it would be better to do the industrial extraction of copper metal here than to bring all the ore to Egypt and do it there. In other words, what they would ship out of here was just the metal.
Yeah, they would take, okay.
Okay. And the way they did it basically was to drop shafts. This is an open one, but you can see circular shafts all around this area till they hit the vein of copper ore that they knew they would find. In other words, it wasn't a random shot. They would hit that line, which is here, and we can actually see some of the remnants of it. And then they would cut horizontal shafts like the ones that we see here to actually mine the ore straight out. They weren't blundering around here on
They were very efficient.
Efficient, they were directed. They know that they're an area of copper. As a matter of fact, here, you don't have to go very far. Here's some copper ore.
It's everywhere around us.
It's everywhere around. And what I find particularly interesting, in addition to the mining, which, when you think about it, is an industrial machinery wonder.
Yeah, this is ancient mining.
Where they're doing it by hand.
By the way, who was doing it? Who was actually doing the mining? We know it was Egyptian directed.
Right, well, there were slaves, certainly.
Slave labor, and just so people know, it's, I think, 106 degrees Fahrenheit here today, where we are.
In the shade.
In the shade. Where luckily we have a little bit of a patch of it here in the mines.
Right, and which also tells us that they understood how to work in this kind of heat. Because, because they had slaves, they didn't treat them well and that sort of thing. But you can't have your slave population dying off on you.
I mean, there's the desert, and then there's the desert. Right. This is the desert where we are right now.
We're really in the middle of it.
Yeah.
From a purely human history point of view, we have this error in thought in which we think that we behave as if the ancients were primitive. And I know you've probably had it in conversations. I know that I have people who say that religion is the result of superstition of primitive peoples, and they're trying to explain a world that they don't understand and that sort of thing. Well, I challenge someone to explain to me how over 3,000 years ago, people understood and knew that if you heat this up to a high enough temperature, you will get copper metal out of it. And then how do you actually go about raising the temperature to that level in a furnace in order to do it? And to separate the metal, purify it, and they actually ship the copper metal ingots from here, leaving the slag, the junk behind.
Wow. Talk about a smart business mind.
That's right.
Among the Egyptians and industrial.
Yeah. So, of course, this is a major economic resource center for them. Copper is important for them, not just today pennies, right? But it's part of their metal work. It's part of how they make weapons. They're making bronze out of it. They already know enough metallurgy. They're not further on yet, but they've moved from sticks and stones to using metal in a very sophisticated way. And once again, we're talking about 3,500 years ago.
Yeah, so this was around the time of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, maybe after that, maybe
right.
Moses.
Right. Yeah, in that interregnum.
Yeah. When did the party end for the Egyptians here in Timna and in these copper mines?
Well, Egypt goes into a bit of a recessional decline, if you will. And of course, it matches with the rise of David. Remember that the Philistines are Egyptian proxy front line. They're defeated by Saul ultimately, well, by David ultimately. They fought They defeated Saul.
Yeah.
The defeat of the Philistines is part of a drive pushing the Egyptians back. Now the Jews, or not called Jews yet, but for our purposes,
The Israelites.
they're past Israelites, the Davidic dynasty, the tribes, don't have an interest in conquering Egypt. They're not going back there. So the desert, the Negev and Sinai, become a sort of buffer zone between them. And Solomon comes down here because he starts using this area for the same reason the Egyptians did. And we talk about Solomon's mines here, and Solomon's name appears. And he uses the port of what we call today Eilat to ship out through the Indian Ocean. And here again, interestingly enough, we think that global trade is a mid 15th, 16th century phenomenon. No. It goes back to 2,000 and more years, 3,000 years.
Yeah, so there's an amazing biblical history here. It's a geological wonder, Tim the Park. Yes. It's just stunning, the landscape here. And by the way, that breeze that just went past was pretty nice.
It was.
We needed that. Off to the desert. Hopefully there's an oasis. Let's go.
Let's go.
Thanks again to Elliot Chodoff for bringing us the powerful story of Timnah. Up next, we're staying in the Negev desert with our good friend Danny the Digger Herman to learn about one of the most mysterious peoples of the ancient Middle East. And we might just get some clues about the origins of the 3 wise men. Folks, you won't want to miss this. Don't move.